Hey everyone, and welcome back. Have you ever actually stopped to wonder what it takes to build a massive movement right from the ground up? Well, today in this explainer, we're going to do a step-by-step visual deconstruction of a protest. We'll be using the real-world Long March for Justice movement, the one that followed the controversial NEET UG 2026 examinations, as our guide. We are going to track its entire life cycle, literally from the very first moments of a loose assembly all the way to highly organized civic action. So get ready, because the visual strategy behind these events is absolutely fascinating. So this brings us to our core question. How exactly does a crowd of frustrated students transform into a formidable national movement? It's really easy to assume these demonstrations just spontaneously happen. But if we look closely at the visual evidence, the signs, the group formations, even the time of day, we can actually track a distinct strategic evolution. They're essentially following a playbook, using visual cues to build momentum, recruit supporters, and ultimately demand that they be heard. To make sense of this whole evolution, we'll be breaking this down into 4 clear phases today. 1, the initial gathering. 2, a display of unity. 3, the March for Justice. And 4, visualizing the movement. Right, let's kick things off with phase 1, the initial gathering. Okay, let's dive into this. Every major movement starts with individuals making the choice to simply step out of their daily routines, right? Here, you can see citizens and students affected by the 2026 exams assembling completely organically. With that prominent clock tower anchoring them in a recognizable public space, the whole mood is just really loose and grassroots. It honestly has the feeling of a community coming together in the daytime to figure out their next steps. It's that initial spark of mobilization, right before the fire really catches. And in these early stages, you'll notice the materials are pretty rudimentary. We're talking basic handheld signage and foundational banners laid out on the ground that just simply declare protest. The messaging, like that "We Stand Together" sign being held high above the crowd, is direct, it's unpolished, and it's intensely human. This phase isn't about slick production value at all. It's really about sheer presence and establishing the absolute core reason for just being there. Which leads us perfectly into phase 2, a display of unity. Now, as a movement starts gaining traction, watch how the environment deliberately shifts from the bright exposure of day to the quiet solemnity of dusk. You've got hundreds of lit diyas, those small oil lamps, perfectly lined up along the steps. This is actually where figures like climate activist Sonam Wangchuk often lend their presence, transforming a loose assembly into a highly disciplined vigil. The visual power of that unified light in the darkness, it sends a huge signal of deep, unwavering commitment to the cause. And looking elevated above the crowd, there is this massive bilingual banner, "Unity Prevails," alongside "Ekta Ki Jeet." Featuring those 4 interlocking hands of different colors, this graphic perfectly centralizes their message of solidarity. But beyond that, it marks a huge leap in production value. They're moving from hand-painted cardboard to a massive, professionally printed symbol. It basically tells the world, look, we are organized and we are incredibly serious. To put that into perspective, this strategic evolution is absolutely crucial. We're moving from a daytime setting with basic signage and informal groupings over to the strategic use of dusk, unified lighting, and highly produced banners. This deliberate shift builds an unbelievable amount of visual and emotional momentum, proving to everyone watching that this group is more than capable of sustained organized action. And that momentum pushes us into phase 3, the March for Justice. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how solidarity and vigils are so often just the prelude to direct action. Here, the movement hits the barricaded streets, which is very reminiscent of those tense standoffs we've seen at Jantar Mantar. Heavily flanked by police officers in blue camouflage, the entire atmosphere pivots completely. We go from a solemn vigil to a determined, high-stakes march. The group is now actively, physically confronting the state authorities. The shift to a mobile march creates this incredible dynamic energy, and they are visually boxed in by those yellow police barricades that frame the conflict perfectly. Up at the front, notice the central leader coordinating their tight formation using a megaphone. This level of tactical coordination is completely essential as the students physically push their demands forward, setting the stage for those critical, ongoing negotiations with the government. And notice the stark shift in vocabulary and color palette here. Using black and yellow, which, are colors universally associated with caution and urgency, the text now reads, "Fight for Justice," or "Nyai ke liye sangharsh." That earlier, peaceful message of unity has officially escalated into a struggle. The visual tone perfectly matches their rhetorical shift from a peaceful gathering into an active, unyielding demand. So let's step back and look at phase 4, visualizing the movement. And this brilliantly illustrates the 3 chronological steps of successful civic action, perfectly mirrored by these NEET UG students. Step 1, mobilize with clear intent. Make your presence known. Step 2, unify through shared symbols. Use lighting and professional banners to show your discipline. And step 3, act and demand. Take all that unified energy, hit the streets with megaphones, and force those negotiations. The visual symbols literally drive the message home at every single stage. So this leaves us with one final provocative thought. What exactly makes a visual message powerful enough to actually force a government to the negotiating table? We've just seen how a loose crowd transforms into a marching force, armed with a deliberate visual strategy. These tactics, they aren't just background details. They are the literal language of change. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really encourage you to look a bit closer the next time you see a movement unfolding on your screens, because I promise you, every single banner and barricade is part of a calculated story. Until next time, keep learning.